Welcome to Seattle Atheist Church. Atheists, agnostics, skeptics, whatever you like to call yourself, you are welcome here. At Seattle Atheist Church, we call ourselves an atheist church because you will never hear anything supernatural promoted from the podium. This is our creed. Seattle Atheist Church was founded on the principles of scientific naturalism and secular ethics. Truth claims are attempted here, and we stand ready to revise our thinking in light of new information. We attempt to be excellent to all conscious beings, and we believe in good, because good works in non-mysterious ways. If that sounds good to you, then you are probably in the right place. And the way that we do it here is that the members ourselves give the talk. We have a quarterly planning meeting where everyone is invited, and then we do the talk, and afterwards we have a discussion. So next week after church, we will have board games at the Wayward Coffee House, which is on 65th and Roosevelt. So please join us if you're interested in that. So Brent, please come on up. Thank you.
So as you might be aware, February is Black History Month. My talk doesn't have anything to do with Black history, but on February 1st, Google was commemorating Carter G. Woodson, who is he's referred to as the father of Black history. And when I clicked on the Google Doodle that had his picture, 3 quotes from him came up on the side of the web page, and I saw that 2 of them were relevant to this talk. So I thought I would share those first. The first one is, when you control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions. And the second one is actually also relevant to what I was talking to Eva about earlier. The mere imparting of information is not education. So just let that sink in. And the next thing I want to talk about is fake news. So fake news came into our lexicon during the 2016 election, but it has certainly been around much longer than that. Back in the early 1800s, journalists would come up with hoaxes in order to help sell newspapers. And one of these more famous hoaxes was the moon hoax, which ran in the Sun newspaper in New York. So this journalist, Richard Adams Locke, he came up with this story about the moon, observations of the moon, and he imputed it to Sir John Herschel, who was a prestigious astronomer, to give it the veneer of respectability. So there were two things that were good about Herschel. Was that one, he was a prestigious astronomer. So, and also he was currently in Africa, building an observatory, so he wouldn't know that that he was being, this story was being said about him, that he didn't actually say any of these things, right? So they had a paper that they referred to, which they said they'd gotten from Herschel, but it was mysteriously missing whenever anybody asked to see it. It was over at some other print shop over there, something like that. So, but what they reported that Herschel had seen on the moon was trees, oceans, unicorns. There was bipedal beavers without tails, and a race of bat people that frolicked on the beaches and built temples and flew around. And this was quite successful, sold a lot of papers. And it was so successful that other papers started picking up the story. They're like, oh, we saw the paper too, and we got a copy of it, and here's some more about the bat people. Some papers did challenge it. They claimed it was a hoax, but Richard Locke said, oh, they can't prove it isn't true. But finally, Locke did admit the hoax to somebody, and it did get revealed. But what do you think the reaction of the readers of The Sun was?
Before or after it was revealed it was a hoax?
After it was revealed.
Cover up.
They kept believing it.
They believed it anyway.
It's a government cover up.
Well, no, actually, a few of them were upset, but most of them were not. And they say like, oh, well, I knew it was a hoax all along. It fooled other people, but not me. So, so they were entertained, so it was okay. All right, so fast forward to today, and it's rather interesting because now we have hoaxes and fake news stories that can go out all over the world very rapidly and can have, pretty big ramifications. But also, on the other hand, it's a lot easier to debunk fake news stories because you can find the debunkings too if you want to look for them. That's the thing. If you want to look for them, you can find the other points of view. But the way I see it, it's kind of similar to junk food, because humans evolved in an environment that was that had low amounts of fats and sugars, so the body was evolved to hold on to those fats and sugars whatever could get them. But now that we're in an environment that has lots of fats and sugars in our food, we have rampant obesity. So we need to have something that will kind of help us to avoid some of the junk food on the internet. So some of the fake news stories that were going around in 2016 were the Pope endorsed Bernie Sanders. The Pope endorsed Donald Trump. The Pope forbids Catholics from voting for Hillary. All fake. The Pope did not endorse or disendorse anybody. Democrats want to impose Sharia law in Florida. Protesters are being paid thousands of dollars to disrupt Trump rallies. So, the guy that came up with this one, he runs a bunch of fake news websites. And he admits that he made it up just to get clicks. Of course, now he calls it a parody, and he had no idea that it would go out of control, But you can actually trace this back to one person saying, I made it up. So there's that. The most infamous fake news story is probably Pizzagate, which is the story about how the Hillary Clinton campaign allegedly was running a child trafficking ring out of the basement of a pizza parlor. This is a pizza parlor which does not actually even have a basement. The floor plan is actually a matter of public record. You can look it up and see that. But the fact of that, and the fact that there was zero evidence, did not stop people from believing in it and spreading it around, and it actually inspired one man, Edgar Welch, to go into the pizza parlor with guns and shoot the place up. Now, the reason why you want to go in there with guns blazing when you're trying to rescue kids, I don't know, but anyway, he was caught and he's going to be put away for a while, but this has echoes from when somebody calling themselves the Masked Patriot invaded the Bohemian Grove, which is like a place where rich men go to party and stuff. And there's a bunch of videos about how there's supposedly satanic rituals going on there and stuff, and he ran in there with guns too. So these stories can affect people in bad ways. So, but after the Pizzagate shooting, a lot of the people who believed in it still believed in it. They were undeterred. Michael Flynn Jr., who's the son of Michael T. Flynn and a member of Trump's transition team, said, "Until Pizzagate proven to be false, it'll remain a story." No, until it's proven to be false. Okay? So I want you to just take that, fold it up, put it in your pocket, because I'm going to get back to that. So a lot of this stuff, I think you can avoid as long as you keep 4 magic words in mind. Like, I could be wrong, right? There's a lot of people that I argue with that it seems like they do not want to admit that they could possibly be wrong. And everybody can be wrong. Everybody can be fooled. It's important to realize that. The one problem with the term fake news, though, is that Donald Trump has co-opted it so well that if you use it, people might assume that you're a Trump supporter. So maybe we'd be better off using Carl Sagan's term, which is baloney. Carl Sagan introduced the Baloney Detection Kit in his book, The Demon Haunted World. And The Demon Haunted World is an excellent book. I highly recommend everybody read it. It's basically Carl Sagan's worldview. And he's a very good writer. It's very easy to read. It has what I call common sense epistemology. And epistemology is the branch of philosophy that deals with knowledge. It tries to answer the question, how do we know what is true? So the first part of the Baloney Detection Kit I want to talk about is falsifiability. So falsifiability was explicated by a philosopher of science named Karl Popper. And what Karl Popper said was that for a scientific idea to be useful, it has to be able to be falsified. So there has to be a scenario where it could be proven false. It's a little hard to explain it sometimes like that, because I try to explain it to people and they get kind of confused. They're like, so in order for it to be true, it has to be false? So maybe it's better to use an example. So Bertrand Russell, who's another philosopher, he came up with a thought experiment called Russell's teapot. So Russell postulated that there's a teapot orbiting the sun somewhere out in the asteroid belt, let's say. So you say, okay, well, we have been looking at the sky for a long time now, we haven't found a teapot with any other telescopes. He goes, oh, what's a small teapot? It's hard to find. So how are you going to disprove that? Maybe even if you could somehow look at every part of the sky simultaneously and say, okay, there's still no teapot. He goes, oh, well, you know what? I bet the teapot landed on one of the asteroids. So that's where it is. So good luck proving that false, right? Carl Sagan came up with something similar, which is Sagan's dragon. He said, I have a dragon in my garage. And so he's like, okay, well, I know Carl Sagan's a very smart man, but I'm still skeptical. I want to see the dragon in your garage. So you go into Carl Sagan's garage, there's no dragon. He's like, there's no dragon. He goes, well, it's a small dragon, and it's shy, so it's probably hiding. So, okay. Get out your magnifying glass, look over every square centimeter of the garage, still no dragon. And he goes, I forgot to tell you, the dragon can turn invisible. So, but what it comes down to is there's no way to test for a garage with a dragon, garage without a dragon. So as far as we know, it's as if the dragon doesn't even exist in the first place, because it doesn't have any effect on the world that we can measure, right? So you're safe in not believing in it. But some people will say, okay, but fantastical things are exciting, like dragons. A world with dragons is more interesting and more fun than a world without dragons. So I'm going to believe in dragons. It's like, okay, but you do have to draw a line somewhere. Because if you don't draw that line anywhere, you're just going to be gullible. And then somebody comes along with a rock, like a magic rock, and says, my magic rock will protect you from dragons. You're like, well, I already believe in dragons, and I can't prove that this rock can't protect me, so I guess I better buy it. So that's falsifiability. The second one I want to talk about is extraordinary claims requiring extraordinary evidence. That's kind of related to the first one. So if I say that while I was walking over here, I almost got hit by a car, you probably could believe that because that's something that happens fairly frequently, you know. But if I say, while I was walking over here, I got abducted by a UFO, you need a higher standard of evidence for that, right? And everybody uses this to a degree. Like, there are people who, like if you have somebody who believes that Bush did 9/11, but you tell them that you believe in UFOs and they laugh, you know? Everybody's got some extraordinary beliefs that they will not believe. And we have to be really careful about this because there are things that you're going to want to believe because they play into your prejudices. I think that's why a lot of people believe stuff like Bush did 9/11 or Hillary Clinton had some people murdered or something like that. It's because they didn't like Bush or they don't like Hillary. I don't think anybody was a fan of George Bush until they heard that he did 9/11 and they're like, oh, well, you know. No, they hated him before and that's why they believed the theory. So these play into our prejudices. And Penn Jillette of Penn and Teller likes to say, everybody's got a gree-gree. So a gree-gree is, I think it's like a voodoo talisman or something like that. And so what he means is that everybody has some extraordinary claim that is not backed up by extraordinary evidence, but they believe it anyway. So they'll apply skepticism to all these other things, but when they get to that one thing, like their cherished belief, they'll just back away from it. So, how are we doing on time? Okay. So, there are a couple of, like my top 2 gree-grees for critical thinkers. All right. So I'm possibly going to make some people angry here, but I wanted to bring this out here. So my top 2 for critical thinkers are extraordinary claims that I do not believe are backed up by the evidence, but are popular with people who are critical thinkers. Okay. Number 1 is the Myers-Briggs personality inventory. Okay, so if you don't know, this is a test that has like 80 or 100 questions or something like that, and then they give you 4 letters that are supposed to sum up your personality, right? So I think most critical thinkers, when they see a personality test from Scientology, they'll be like, okay, that's bunk, because after you take it, they try to sell you something. But this one, it gets accepted more readily because it looks more sciencey, and they don't try to sell you anything. They just give you 4 letters, and you can tell people I'm an INTJ or something like that. Now, I first ran into this. When I was living in California, and I was unemployed, and I was trying to get welfare. And as part of the intake process, they have you take Myers-Briggs. I don't know if they still do this. This was back in the 90s. But I got the 4 letters. Okay. I think I was an ENTP. So then, one of those. Yeah. All right, so.
That all makes sense now.
So then I got a job for a while, but unfortunately it was a temporary job. It didn't last very long. It was only a few months. So then I went back to get back on welfare, and they said, oh, well, you have to take Myers-Briggs again. I'm like, why? But those are the rules. I had to do that. So, okay, I took the test again. I got a different score. I got different 4 letters. And I think it was like INTJ. So it was like 1 letter was the same. I'm like, did I change that much in 6 months? So I asked my job counselor about it, and she said, oh, don't worry about it. Just kind of waved it off. And I went, okay. So then, several years later, I got curious about it again, probably because a lot of women who show up in my OkCupid profile, they have their 4 letters in their profile. I thought, I want to see if there's any scientific evidence backing this up. And I looked and I looked and I looked. I really couldn't find any good studies backing it up. And I thought, this is astrology for intellectuals. So that's number 1. Number 2 is memetics. So memetics was introduced by Richard Dawkins in the late 70s in his book, The Selfish Gene. And it's this idea that ideas mutate and evolve similar to genes, and they propagate, similar to natural selection. Dawkins is a great biologist, but as a sociologist, I think he's kind of, out of his element. Because for one thing, I'm thinking, okay, ideas do not randomly mutate. So maybe I'm not understanding it properly, but that's what it seems to me. And also, I haven't seen any predictive value that memetics has, and I don't know how it has advanced humanity in any quantifiable way. So, but again, there's those 4 words. I could be wrong. So, if anybody has any evidence they want to give me later, I'll be willing to look at it. The next one I want to talk about, and I'm only going to be able to touch on a few of these because there's a lot of them, but I'm hitting like what I feel are the most important ones. There's post hoc. Post hoc, it's short for post hoc ergo propter hoc, which is a Latin phrase meaning after this, therefore because of this, which is kind of a mouthful. We just call it post hoc for short. And there's a good story that goes along with that one too to illustrate it. There's a rooster who believes that he can cause the sun to rise. Because every morning, he wakes up, hops on top of the fence, crows, and the sun comes up. So he goes, whenever I crow, the sun comes up, therefore I make the sun come up. So if the rooster was scientifically minded, you might think, okay, well, if I want to test this, maybe one morning I can try not crowing and see what happens. And this is kind of funny, but it can have serious consequences. There's a story about a Soviet psychic named E. Frankel, who was convinced he had the power to stop moving vehicles. So what he would do is he would step in front of a moving vehicle, hold his hands out, and it would stop. So he believed that when he believed
slow ones, right? Just slow ones.
He believed that when he was put in mortal danger, his psychic powers would trigger and prevent the vehicle from hitting him. So first he started with bicycles, then he worked up to cars, then he worked up to buses. He was always successful. He would put his hands out and they would stop. So he goes, I'm going to put my ability to the ultimate test. I'm going to try a train. So he stepped down in front of the train, put his hands out, tensed, and the train didn't stop. And it hit him and he died. So, now you might think that, okay, that's a really weird case. That's something that would never happen to you, but there is this is the way a lot of alternative medicine works, is that people take something and they think, people take something, they get better, and they think that, oh, well, whatever I took made me better, whether it was like a pill or a tea or whatever it was. But most people don't sit and make a graph of their pain or their symptoms or whatever, and they don't take a medication when they're feeling well. They take it when they're feeling sick. And if you're at the top of if you're at the top of a peak in your pain, and you take a medication and it goes down, then you'll say, the medication did it. But it might have just gone down anyway because you were at a peak and you're about to go into a valley. So, and this can be dangerous because people can take these alternative medicines instead of going to a real doctor, and they can get sicker and in some cases even die. Unfortunately, a lot of times I have people argue with me about this and say, hey, that's natural selection. You know, You know, if you're dumb enough to not go to a doctor, that's your fault. Okay, so I hope we can agree that it's not moral to take advantage of vulnerable people. So if somebody took advantage of a mentally disabled person or an old woman or something like that, we'd say that's wrong. And I think this is the same kind of a thing. Like, everybody's dumb about something. But maybe you don't think so. But I have an example. Steve Jobs. I think most people would say Steve Jobs is a smart person, smart businessman, you know. Most people would like to be as smart in business as Steve Jobs was. But Steve Jobs got pancreatic cancer, and instead of going to see a medical doctor, he decided to treat it with alternative medicines. He tried acupuncture, he tried fruit juices, he tried spiritualism, and he eventually went to a medical doctor, but by that time it was too late. Steve Jobs' biographer, Walter Isaacson, was interviewed about this, and he said, quote, "We talked about this a lot. He wanted to talk about how he regretted it. I think he felt he should have been operated on sooner. I think he felt if you ignore something you don't want to exist, you can have magical thinking. It had worked for him in the past. He would regret it." So that's, you know, magical thinking can really be dangerous in some cases. Finally, I want to close up by saying that so the Baloney Detection Kit is really best for using on yourself. Like, a lot of people like to use this stuff in arguments, like to jump in and be like, haha, post hoc reasoning, ad hominem, you know. And that's really good gotchas, but they're not going to convince the person you're arguing with. So they might convince people that are listening, but if you want to convince the person you're arguing with, you're probably going to have to do other things than just hit them with what logical fallacies they're using. It can be very difficult to root out bogus beliefs that you've held for a long time, but you can do it. And a good baloney detection kit can prevent you from getting new ones. So finally, I want to close with 3 extraordinary claims. One of them is lead causes violent crime. 2, cigarettes cause cancer. The reason why they cause cancer is because they are radioactive. And number 3 is cats cause schizophrenia. Now all of these have different levels of evidence behind them, you know, but none of them are crackpot ideas. These are all, you know, seriously studied by real scientists. And let me tell you, the guy who's studying whether or not cats cause schizophrenia, he gets a lot of very angry mail from cat lovers. Because when you attack people's pets, you know, it's like attacking a member of their family. They just go, oh, you know. But you have to be willing to set that aside, you know, and examine the evidence. And so skepticism should be the beginning of the conversation and not the end of it. So thank you.